Hi, I am Dr. Brandon Hamilton. I tell people I'm a pracademician, and you might wonder just what does that mean? Well, it's not a new term. Actually, it was first coined in 1973, so it's been around a while. Some people, some people translate that to academic practitioner. Others translate it to practitioner academic. So you get the idea. And the reason I feel important to let people know that because it informs my consultant engagement process. My consulting process is not too different from the instructional design work I do in academia, the end point being talent development and learning. So, just to give you a quick overview, I've taught at city colleges, undergrad and grad universities and colleges all across the United States. I've consulted with such notable firms or organizations at the City of Hope and the Cancer Research Center in the West Coast, Ben and Jerry's Ice Cream, also of California, here in the Midwest, Chicago Urban League, Cash America, just to name a few. All right, so um, I think you see now that a pracademic is a professional who actively combines academic research with practical experiences in whatever field. And so mine is business with a particular flavor towards user centric or data centric design of infrastructure. I've worked with financial services, energy and public utilities, healthcare, technology, consumer products and services, and various nonprofit organizations. So, when I engage, I start off with needs assessment. Needs assessment. Now, that's not to be confused with needs analysis, right? You want to start off with determining the different activities that need that are needed by the organization. So I break them up into three buckets. I start off in a macro level, looking at the enterprise. All right, the onboarding compliance, for instance, is part of enterprise, uh, and any kind of training that is needed for new employees. The middle level is mezzo, and that's a smaller bit of the company, breaking it up into divisions, departments, functions, line of business, project teams, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, and a lot of times that leads to leadership training for various kinds of leaders, which is my last level, the micro level for individuals. So sometimes I do work with the CIO and the CEO. So once again, it's important to uncover the needs before analysis is done, and so that means I usually start with looking at the strategic plan, examining performance appraisals, the data of performance appraisals to see how are you measuring your performance. I look at trended performance data then if you have that, and then I meet with the executives to see if they feel we're on the right track. And what I do is I triangulate all that data. Okay, there's various sources there. So one source doesn't tell all; they tell different stories. I translate, triangulate those sources, and generally the needs are pretty high. As a matter of fact, the needs are most probably much greater than the resources to support that. So, how does one handle that? How do I handle that? How do we handle that? Well, you need to prioritize. You need to prioritize your needs. Okay, so I would say start with the high impact needs. Now, some people look at the high impact with minimal resources first, and then they follow that with the high impact needs with the ones with the high resources. Others do it the other way around. They look at the high impact needs, and then those with the high resources, and then ones with the low, and then follow that up then with the low impact, low resources, and low impact, high resources. All right. So if you do that properly, you're ready to do the analysis. All right. So I repeat again, needs before analysis. So that's where I began instructional design. I really do see consultant work as instructional. A lot of collaborative instruction, however. It helps me to build stronger relationships with clients, and it helps you build relationship with your clients. And it makes sure that we all understand the business challenges that are in front of us. Ensures that we're focused on the right activities, and helps the business leaders develop expectations that make sense, strategically making sense, and realize that there's a shared ownership framework here. Okay, you don't want to see yourself as working on this alone. There's a shared ownership. Okay, and so that's still not the end of it all, because you want to define what success looks like, right? You want to evaluate now how you're doing. You have to design some kind of a success model, and so you want to use that criterion that you've come up with, evaluation criteria, to see how you're doing. Okay, so I think you can see this is kind of cyclical. So I call it organizational learning, where the organization theory models that I've studied sometimes are the tool bag that I pull from. And when I was working on my doctorate, I was first introduced to some of this work by Chris Argowitz, where he looked at single and double loop learning. Okay, single loop was individuals, groups, and organizations looking at the expected and obtained outcomes, and they're looking for that gap. And so then if you iterate on those single loop learning activities, then that's what he called double loop learning. I then got into and that's not new. That's 1978. And then when I was working on my MBA, 1989 to 1991, I bonded a lot with Larry Greiner from Harvard, ultimately then at USC, where I got my MBA. And so he got into stages of organizational growth, and he was my mentor. And then I extended his research for my doctorate. So before I got the doctorate, I studied Kim Daniel, where he sort of took a lot of that and he moved it into the political space. So that's kind of his modeling. Akijiro Naraka looked at organizational learning somewhat as Chris Argowitz, in a spiral fashion, further illustrating the continuous learning and the tactical knowledge of the key persons in the organization, and how they can make that explicit and codify it into manuals, new products, new processes, et cetera, which he called that externalization. I looked at some of the stuff from Nick Bontis. Nick Bontis was looking at three levels of analysis. He combined individual, team, and organizational. And what he did was he tried to see if there's some alignment there with the stock performance and the organizational performance. Somewhere around 1999, 2000, I got into Flood, who discusses work from Peter Senge. Some of you know Peter Senge's famous book, The Fifth Discipline. So that is, of course, on my shelf. So that's just a general idea of the organizational learning parts of my consultant. I look very much at that model and that toolkit to help me make sense of data and being able to act on basis of generalization. But that's very scientific. When you look at the managers, uh, it's not so clean. It's not that simple. There are a lot of theories that I just brought out. Uh, and so, which recipe do they apply? Well, it's situational. It's situational. It's another reason why you need to consider bringing on a consultant. There is no one size fits all. And so, um, my consultant involves with a narrative practice. I sit with the proper groups, and in a sense, it's like a training meeting where we try to increase the organizational learning. Sometimes listening to organizational stories from what brought you to where you are right now, and then of course looking at where you want to go in the future. All right, so this has to be done in a sophisticated way, and like I said, my specialty is information architecture. So let me give you an analogy. Most people can understand an architect as a building, right? You take the owner's vision, and the architect's plans come from that, and then the builder implements based on the architect's plan or interpretation of the owner's vision. Well, I take a similar approach in information management. Okay, so there, it goes from the abstract to the concrete, just as a building architect, where I start with the strategy or your strategic needs, 5-year plan. I come up with an architecture model that we all agree with, and then the outcome of that is infrastructure. Infrastructure. Okay, so infrastructure is the hardware, the software, the networks, all of that, websites. But as you've heard me, it's also knowledge. It's also knowledge. It involves being very, very clear how to use the technical skills of your IS staff, then and working together to come up with an infrastructure. It involves working with end users, and that could be third party end users. And so the business process reengineering that comes from this is really my model of relationships, right? Relationships. So I hope this makes sense. I hope you learned a little bit from this. If you like some of my conversations, which I share when I can, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. All right. I am Dr. Brandon Hamilton. Thank you so much for listening.